What's up, guys? Hope y'all are having a great day today, just full of so much positivity and happiness, dude, because for the first time in a long time, we're going to be talking about a game that, for the most part, I am very positive on, and that, of course, is Astro Bot. Now, apologies in advance if my voice sounds absolutely terrible. It physically hurts to talk right now, but given the nature of game reviews and needing to go ahead and crank this one out in order to strike while the iron's hot, we're going to be talking about Astro Bot, which I actually completed the night after release. I 100%ed the game. I achieved the Platinum Trophy. So at this point, I have seen everything. I've beaten the game. I've beaten all the challenge levels. I've collected every collectible. I've gotten all the gacha rewards, all the costumes, you name it. So I have done and seen everything that Astro Bot as a video game has to offer as it sits right now. And I'm happy to report that this is by far the best game that Sony has put out in quite some time, man. This is actually a video game for once, which is kind of crazy to say because for the most part, when you play a Sony game, it's more movie than video game, at least nowadays, and this feels like a complete and total departure. In the past, even when Sony had like their movie type games, they would always have a studio called Japan Studios that would put out more unique gameplay oriented experiences, and while Team Asobi is actually the remnants of Japan Studios at Sony after Japan Studios got shut down, so it makes sense that they actually put out the closest thing to a video game that we've seen from Sony in quite some time, and I really do hope that this is a directional shift and that Astro Bot is a massive success, because this was a game made by a 60-person development team in a little under 3 years, which when you compare that to the rest of Sony's projects out there with multi-hundreds if not thousands of developers working on a game for 5 to 7 years with a $200 to $300 million budget, the contrast could not be any more stark. I mean, just look at Concord, for example, that cost Sony over $250 million, took 4 to 5 years to develop, we're hearing, and was such a colossal failure that the servers were shut down and the game was completely delisted, with everyone receiving refunds less than 2 weeks after launch. So when you see a game like Astro Bot that has a smaller budget, a smaller development team, and overall is just an absolute blast to play, it really makes you hopeful for the future of PlayStation, and it makes you want this game to succeed, because personally I would love to see more games like this from PlayStation versus things like The Last of Us 2, God of Snore Ragnarok, and Spider-Mid 2. So I will take a game like Astro Bot with a smaller budget, a smaller development team, and focuses on fun 10 times out of 10 compared to these massive blockbuster AAA movie games that Sony has become known for. So I just wanted to add this preface at the beginning of the review in case you don't want to make it all the way through, but Astro Bot is absolutely worthy of the purchase price, and I would recommend everybody with the PlayStation 5 at least play this game at some point, because it is definitely worth your time, your money, and it sends a very clear message to Sony and the rest of the video game industry, especially a mere 2 weeks after Concord, that this is the type of game that we want from game developers. So I just wanted to add that at the beginning because I know most people don't watch to the end of a YouTube video. So yes, absolutely go buy this game. I'm definitely recommending it, but I do have some negatives on it. It's not all, you know, sunshine and rainbows here. I do have some criticisms of this game that we're going to get into a little bit later. But first, let's go ahead and run through the positives surrounding Astro Bot. Now, kicking things off here, we have the most important thing, at least in my mind, is Astro Bot is an incredibly fun video game to play. From start to finish, rarely does the game ever get boring. It is an absolute delight to play through. It is pure gaming at its finest, where, you know, it's just you and a controller and the character you're controlling on screen doing cool shit, and you're having a fun time for the most part from start to finish. Now, that is not to say that the entirety entirety of the game is perfect, because again, we're going to get into some negatives later on, but I would say generally speaking, Astro Bot is an incredibly fun game that you're going to just have a blast playing. It's going to take you back to that classic era of 3D platformers, especially with all the references scattered throughout the game to classic PlayStation franchises, especially within the platforming genre from third-party devs and first-party devs alike. And overall, it's just a really fun game to play. The controls are simple, yet the skill level required for some of the later challenge stages are actually pretty high. I mean, compared to like, I guess the main levels, it's not like a super difficult game. Like, you're not going to be beating your head against a wall for like a day and a half straight, like trying to beat some of those really challenging like Mario Maker levels. So it's nothing to that degree, but there is definitely some challenge to be found here if you kind of go off the main pathway of like the required levels necessary to complete the story. So there is a nice contrast on that, but there's a lot of different little power-ups scattered throughout the games. Like, there's 2 different types of jetpacks. You have frog boxing gloves that basically act as that ability from the Nintendo boxing game ARMS. You get the ability to inflate like a beach ball. You also can pick up a power-up that allows you to swim underwater by having like a penguin on your back. Like, there's a bunch of really cool and unique power-ups that you get on specific stages. Now, this is one of the areas of criticism that I do kind of want to touch on in this particular segment, just because it's relevant. I do kind of wish that these would become like permanent gear that you unlock, that you could swap between within certain levels, because I think one of the weaknesses of Astro Bot is the fact that every single level is kind of a gimmick level. There's no real variability. Everybody's basically going to play it the exact same way. So instead of being able to like hot swap between the different power-ups and abilities that Astro Bot gains access to throughout the game, you can only use one per level, which I guess allows them to create a more catered experience. But at the same time, it also kind of leaves a lot to be desired, because it would be cool if more levels were created in a way where you could use multiple different power-ups to traverse and get through the level in different ways, and would force you to think creatively on which power-up you need to use in that particular circumstance in order to tackle the challenge that's in front of you. So I do think that's kind of one weakness. So I say that to say I do like the power-ups. I just wish they were implemented to a deeper and more strategic level into the game to add in some variety and variability to the experience, because pretty much every single mission in this game is just kind of like, oh, find the power-up at the beginning of the level and use that to get through the level. So I think it would have been cool if you would have had those kind of like gimmicky stages where you first acquire that particular power-up, you go through an entire level that teaches you how to use it in all the various circumstances, and then it gets added to your permanent arsenal of power-ups, which you use throughout the rest of the game to tackle all the platforming challenges that you're faced with. But instead, it kind of just falls into that same structure throughout the entirety of the game. So I say that to say this: I really did like the power-ups that they implemented into this game. They all felt unique, they all felt good in their own right, but I just wish they would have been used in a way that allowed more player choice, is what I'm trying to get at here. But that being said, I definitely do think they are a positive aspect of the game. And just kind of going back to what we kind of already talked about in that, the level design for the most part is absolutely fantastic. Every single level in this game feels very unique, aside from some of the more repetitive challenge type levels that appear in every single galaxy. I would say all the main stages in this game feel absolutely incredible to play through. They all have a very unique visual aesthetic. They all have their own unique theme, and especially the levels that are based on the PlayStation IPs. Like, there's a God of War level, an Uncharted level, a Horizon level, and so on. They're just really well done, and you can tell like that was the strength of this game, is just coming up with these really unique stages to play through. I really wish there was more levels that were themed after PlayStation IPs, which maybe that'll be DLC in the future, maybe that'll be in sequels, I have no idea. But when I played those at the end of every single galaxy, there are 5 total that you get to play through, and all of them were just really cool, and I really enjoyed them. So overall, I definitely think that is a very big highlight of the game, is the level design. And within all of these levels, there is just insane attention to detail. Like, for example, on this one level where you use a shrinking ability to traverse through like the world as a mouse, basically, you'll go underneath this bed, and there are pieces of cheese that are underneath the bed, and they're in the shape of like a pyramid, a cube, a sphere, and then an X, like for the PlayStation face buttons. And it's like just small things like that everywhere throughout the environment is so cool, man. Like every opportunity they had to add these tiny little details that most people probably won't even notice, they did. So there was a lot of love and care that went into crafting the different environments and level design throughout this game from start to finish to just an insane degree of attention. And I definitely think that is a massive highlight for this game especially. And for a platformer in particular, I feel like that's almost as important as the actual gameplay itself, because when you're platforming, you're exploring these levels by nature. So them being as well made as they are just made the gameplay experience even better in my opinion. And just kind of circling back again on that, to top it all off with these amazing environments, you have some of the most beautiful visuals in gaming. Like, I am so glad people are finally coming around to the idea with this game that graphics do not need to be photorealistic to be considered next generation. This game looks so fucking good. The colors pop. Just everything looks so detailed and high resolution and clear and crisp. Like, this game to me looks more next generation than something like God of Snore Ragnarok, because everything just pops and is beautiful and vibrant and makes you want to explore the world because of just how gorgeous it is. Like, there are some genuine moments in this game. Like, there's one where it's raining gemstones on top of you and the light is reflecting off of every single stone individually, and they're perfectly rendered with no blur whatsoever. And I don't really even feel like I can describe it. You just need to see it for yourself. But there are moments like that where you're just like, holy shit, dude, this looks absolutely incredible. Like another one where a similar scenario is happening, but it's raining gold and the light is reflecting off of all the gold surfaces simultaneously. Like, you could tell that Japan Studios made this game, because I had a similar experience with a little game, maybe you've heard of it, called Knack. And personally, I was a big fan of Knack when it came out as a launch title for the PlayStation 4. I know it's a meme and everything, but I genuinely enjoyed both Knack titles. And one of the things I always really liked about it was just how cool it was when Knack would break apart and all the particles would fly all over the screen, and they looked super detailed and you could like distinguish each one clearly. Like, that was always to me such a cool technological showcase, and that is back and better than ever to an even higher degree in Astro Bot. And visually, man, I cannot sing enough praises for this game. It looks absolutely stunning. It runs at a locked 60 frames per second. I did not notice any sort of significant frame drops whatsoever while playing this game. It just looks, runs, and feels amazing, all things considered. I don't really know how else I can describe it other than it's just a great visual experience overall. Now, on top of that, the music I actually thought was pretty good for the most part. There are some annoyances with the music. Like, some of the songs get old very quickly because they just play on loop over and over again and suffer from something I personally don't like when it comes to video game soundtracks, and that's repetitive vocals. Because whenever like soundtracks have like vocals that kind of go on loop over and over again, it gets very, very grating to me. I mean, it may not affect everybody, but it's something I definitely notice, and Astro Bot does kind of suffer from that because most of the songs in this game do have some sort of looping vocal aspect to them, so it does make some of the songs feel like they outstay their welcome. But for the most part, the soundtrack in this game is very well done. It's very unique, and some of the adaptations of like the PlayStation centric themes, like for example, they did renditions of the God of War theme from God of War 2018, the Uncharted theme, the Horizon theme, things like that. Like, some of those are absolutely fantastic. Like, I like the Astro version of the God of War theme better than the actual version found in the game. So a lot of these soundtracks are very well done and they feel very unique unique to this particular game. So it's not your typical generic platforming music. It definitely feels like it's its own thing. So that I will give it credit for. It's just the issue with the looping vocals kind of got a little bit grating to me, but overall, I'd say the soundtrack definitely complements this game and adds to the overall experience, so I would chalk it up to a positive. Now, another positive, which might be surprising for people to hear, is I love the fact that this game was only 10 hours and about 15 hours to 100%, because I am of the mindset that I would rather have a shorter game with better density of quality than a longer game that is more stretched out and less dense with quality content in order to extend the runtime. I would much rather have a fantastic 10 to 15 hour experience than a mediocre 30 to 50 hour experience, and luckily Astro Bot falls into that first category, and I think it is a huge plus for the game, because I think if this game was any longer, you would really start to not be able to ignore a lot of the game's flaws, and they would become more and more prevalent as the game goes on. So personally, I think the runtime of this game is absolutely perfect. Personally, I miss the days of getting 10 to 15 hour long games. Like, I personally don't enjoy games being long for the sake of being long. I'm not someone that equates like, I need to spend $1 per hour of game time. I would rather spend $5 to $10 an hour on a game that's super memorable from start to finish versus $1 an hour for a game that's boring as shit for 50% of the time. Like, I don't understand this time equals price equivalency, because you can literally replay your games. You know that, right? Like, you can turn a 10-hour game into a 100-hour game if you just play through it 10 times. So that's the thing, is like, I've always found that kind of equivalency of, you know, you have to spend X amount of dollars per hour of game time. I've always found that really dumb, and personally, I have always preferred shorter games, with a few exceptions out there. I truly feel like most video games do not earn the right to be over 20 hours long, but that's another topic for another day. So personally, I'm a huge fan of the decision to have Astro Bot not be a super drawn out and long experience. I think short and sweet was definitely to its benefit. So yeah, as you can see, in all the areas that really matter, I am very positive on this game. I think it is definitely worth the price tag and well worth experiencing if you do have a PlayStation 5. So definitely, I do not regret playing this game whatsoever, but I do have some complaints. So let's go ahead and get on over into those. Okay, so our first negative we're going to talk about is by far the biggest one and kind of my biggest beef, I guess, with this game. And it's the fact that there's not a whole lot of replayability. And it kind of comes back to the idea I was talking about earlier, where every single level feels kind of like a gimmick level to teach you how to use the various power-ups that you're going to encounter throughout the game. And none of the levels really feel like a way to test what you've learned so far and apply all those various power-ups to help you traverse through a stage more efficiently. So it would basically be like replaying a tutorial over and over and over and over and over again for each of these power-ups, which is not really fun in my opinion. So it kind of goes back to that thing I was talking about where I wish you would have unlocked the power-ups through those gimmick stages and they would have become part of like a permanent arsenal that you could activate at will and use them in order to traverse through the future stages in different ways depending on how you apply the various power-ups you've unlocked so far throughout the game. But instead, you're just replaying the same gimmick stages over and over and over again, which kind of hurts the replayability, at least in my opinion. Now, you might want to replay through the game if maybe you didn't get all the collectibles the first time through and you want to go do that. But the way I played it is I got all the collectibles on each stage before I moved on to the next one. So there was literally zero incentive for me to go back and replay these stages. And the ones that I did replay, they didn't really stick out to me as anything I'd really want to keep doing, because most of these stages, when you don't have the collectibles to look for, take maybe like 3 to 4 minutes to beat at most if you know what you're doing. So the replayability factor for this really is not there whatsoever. There's not really a reason to go back to it and keep playing. Now, there are some things that they could do to change that. They could add a time trial like mode with leaderboards, which I think they're going to do with a future update they mentioned. So I think that's on the way, but it's not in the game right now, so that's how I have to assess it. And then also, I think it would have been cool that with the Astro Bots that you unlock, you would actually be able to play as those characters, and like your basic melee attack would be replaced by that character's abilities or animations or weapon or whatever, but instead you have a very limited selection of costumes that you have access to. So I think it would have been a lot cooler if you could have unlocked the ability to pick any of the different Astro Bots that you had collected throughout your playthrough and use them to go back and play on the various stages throughout the game, just for like some, I guess, visual variety and maybe like the variety in the attack animations and everything like that, just to mix it up a little bit. Because going back and playing through this game with a different costume is not really a compelling enough reason for me to want to go through all these levels again, especially when they're piss easy once you know how to beat them. So there's not really a whole lot of replayability here, which I mean is, I guess, not a horrible thing, but it's not a good thing if you were looking to maybe like have multiple playthroughs of this. So I do want to count that as a negative, because this is kind of a one and done experience. Once you get all the collectibles, there really is not any incentive to keep playing unless you really enjoyed one particular stage. But how many times are you going to replay that stage before you move on to something else? Because even if you replay that stage 30 times, that might only be an hour of replayability that's added. So that is definitely the first negative I wanted to talk about. And the second negative kind of goes hand in hand with that. And a lot of these stages, because of the gimmicky nature of them, start to feel very repetitive. And what's also kind of harmful in this repetitious nature of the game is the fact that every single galaxy is completely the same. Now, I don't mean the stages are the exact same, but the number of stages, basically the number of collectibles, and the amount of challenge stages and the type of challenge stages are the exact same throughout the entirety of the game. Like, no galaxy really feels that different from another one. It's just the levels within that feel different. So I think it would have been cool if they would have taken like each galaxy and really mixed up the style of levels or challenge levels or whatever it is you're doing within them to, like, I guess, give you a little bit more variety, because you have the exact same challenge stages that appear in every single galaxy, like to the point where they don't even call them different things. They'll just put like the number 3 or the number 4 or the number 5 after it, because they're that indistinguishable from each other, because they're literally just the same thing, only they get more difficult as the game progresses and you move on from galaxy to galaxy. So that, I think, was also to the detriment of the game and just kind of started to make the game feel very copy and paste in some places, especially with the extra activities and challenge stages. And I really wish they would have taken a little bit more creative liberty to just kind of spice up the layout and format of each of the various galaxies, just to provide a little more variety to the gameplay experience. But then again, the runtime of this game kind of keeps that from becoming a problem. If there was like 6 or 7 or maybe 8 galaxies, you would really start to, I feel like, get burnt out on the format of this game, and I think it really would have hurt the overall, I guess, feelings towards it, because most people, I have a feeling by that point, would feel like the game was way too drawn out and way too repetitive. So again, I do think the runtime of this game definitely plays to its advantage, because you don't really get a chance to start really hyperfixating on how this game starts to become very repetitive in a lot of those ways. But it's definitely something worth mentioning in the negative section, because it is something that I did notice. Now, also the costumes, I kind of already mentioned this, they're very limited compared to the number of Astro Bots you can unlock. I think there's like, what, maybe 20 something costumes? I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, there's like 20 something costumes that you can equip, maybe 30, and there's 169 Astro Bots you can collect. Like, I think it would have been a much cooler concept if you could have actually like picked one of the Astro Bots that you unlock to play as, versus just getting a very small select number of costumes that you could put on. I feel like that was kind of a missed opportunity. Also, there's not really ever a sense of progression. Again, with those gimmicky kind of levels, you're not really working towards anything. I mean, you're progressively getting better at the platforming mechanics, but at the same time, you never feel like, oh yeah, I've already beaten 60 of the 80 stages, so now I feel so much better equipped to tackle the next one. It's kind of like you're restarting from the very beginning each and every time. So you always die in one hit throughout the game. You never get to keep any of the power-ups you unlock. So there isn't really that sense of progression, which is kind of typical for platformers, but also not typical. It kind of depends on which one you're playing, but I think that would have been cool if maybe there was some form of like upgrade system or ways to feel like you were actually progressing as you continued on through the game. Now, another thing that personally this pissed me off, dude. And dude, the final stage in this game was absolute cancer. I was like literally spurging out on stream because I had just beaten the final boss. I was sick, I wasn't feeling good, and I thought I was done with the game, and I was ready to collect my reward for getting all of the Astro Bots, all the puzzle pieces, and I was greeted with the final challenge level to this game. And this is where I encountered genuine game-breaking bugs where just crazy stuff was happening on this level. And when you really start to push this game to its limits with like the timing and the mechanics and everything like that, you start to kind of notice some cracks in the facade of like this perfect, well-polished product. Now, for the most part, you're never going to notice this type of shit, but in my experience, I encountered a lot of issues with this stage in particular, the biggest of which is when I was playing it and the entire stage just disappeared from under me. What? Bro! What? Which this was already infuriating to begin with because this final stage was actually very challenging and required like near perfect timing for almost every single jump. So when stuff like that happens, it genuinely pisses you off because there's like nothing you can do about it. And another thing I noticed too, especially on this stage, was like my first jump input would just randomly get dropped. I don't know if it's maybe because I was standing too close to an edge, so the game already thought I was suspended in midair or what. But I would press X to jump, and then I would press it again to start using my hover immediately after the jump, but it would go straight into the hover and skip the entire first jump, which basically would result in me dying many times because I didn't actually get any elevation off the first jump when I should have. So that's something that happened a lot on this final stage, and again, I don't know if that was an issue with maybe like it's hard to see where exactly you're standing on the platform, but I was definitely on the platform itself, but it could just be the game was detecting I was so close to the edge that it thought I was already suspended in midair or whatever, and it went straight into the hover, which I don't know how to explain it personally, but that shit was very irritating and resulted in many deaths that really felt like an error with the game itself and not my actual timing. And another issue I had when you had kind of like the over-the-shoulder perspective and you're jumping forwards, like I don't know if it's just me, but I was having trouble like judging the depth of my jumps on where I was actually going to land. And when I would try to adjust the camera to try and give me a more top-down perspective, the camera would constantly fucking adjust on its own, pulling me out of that perspective, which made it harder for me to platform in those instances. So I was constantly at war with the camera and kind of just having to take a guess on how far I was actually jumping forward in a lot of instances because it was really tough to tell where exactly you were going to land and if you were actually going to make it on the platform you were jumping to if the camera perspective kind of got in your way. So that's another critique I have. That one is very minor and only happened in a few instances, but I wish the camera would actually stay where you left it. Maybe there was like some setting for that, but I don't think I saw one. So that was also an annoyance I had while playing this game from like a gameplay perspective. But another negative here, and this is purely a nitpick on my part, but the final reward to this game was such a massive fucking slap in the face. And I guess this is a spoiler, dude. If you can actually spoil this game, I don't know how you would even classify anything in this game as a spoiler. But yeah, here's your little brief spoiler warning. The final reward in this game for collecting all the Astro Bots is not only this awful challenge map that makes you just want to end your life, but the final Astro Bot you unlock, which is the final reward, is like this fucking onion guy. Like, I'd never even heard of this dude in my entire life. He's definitely not an iconic character. I've never seen him referenced anywhere before. People were telling me he was from like this Parappa game or some shit like that. I don't know, man. I'd never seen this motherfucker before, but for your final reward for beating the game, getting all the collectibles, beating this absolutely cancerous, challenge stage, the final Astro Bot you get is like this absolute absolute nobody that 99% of people who play this game are going to be left wondering, going, who the fuck is this guy? Because I guarantee you almost no one's even heard of him. Like, there could have been so many better choices for anyone to put at the end of the game as like the final hidden Astro Bot, but instead it's someone that I had never even heard of in my entire life. So yeah, that was like a massive slap in the face, especially with how much trouble the final challenge stage was giving me. And on top of that, you get arguably the ugliest skin in the game, which is like this PS1 polygon skin. But it just felt super underwhelming, man. Like, all the rewards you got at the end of the game just really sucked. Like, it just really made the whole challenge stage process even worse. But I felt like it was such a bad payoff at the end to get like this absolute nobody character as the final secret cameo of the game that you unlock for doing this final challenge stage and getting every single collectible in the game. So that to me was very, very irritating. But yeah, that's my final, I guess, negative aspect about the game. I already kind of mentioned the music earlier, but overall, these are very minor complaints in the grand scheme of things. I mean, I guess the repetitious nature and the gimmick level design isn't that minor, but it didn't really take away from the experience that much because, like I mentioned, the runtime of this game doesn't really give it a chance to, which I think, again, was a smart decision by the developers in making Astro Bot. So yeah, I think that wraps it up for all my negatives, guys. My throat is absolutely killing me at this point, so let's go ahead and wrap this review up. So with all that said, I don't think it's very hard to see where I stand when it comes to Astro Bot. I think this is a great game for what it is. Is it anything revolutionary? Absolutely not. Is it a platform-defining gaming experience? Absolutely not. Is it a generational title that redefines the platforming genre as we know it? Absolutely not. To make a long story short, Astro Bot is a great game, but it is not a masterpiece like so many are hyping it up to be. I think what's happened is PlayStation owners have gotten so conditioned to receiving the same Sony movie game slop over and over and over again that when they're actually presented with a first-party title that has like the typical level of Sony polish on it, that's primarily a single-player gameplay-driven experience, they think it's a lot better than it actually is. Because as someone who has recently given Mario games a second chance and has played Mario Wonder, Mario 3D World, and Mario Galaxy on the Switch as of late, I can definitely say this game does not even come close to Nintendo's level of innovation and creativity when it comes to platforming mechanics, level design, and unique gimmicks. So that is not even in the equation, I feel like, comparing this game to the best of Mario platformers. I think that is a massive exaggeration to the degree of which Astro Bot succeeds. But that is not to say this game is bad in any way, shape, or form. I think this is a fantastic game. It's definitely worth your time, and I think everyone should check it out if you have the opportunity to do so. There are just some factors that weigh it down from achieving the same level of success as something like a Super Mario Wonder or a Super Mario Galaxy, which it's very obvious to see that Astro Bot was heavily inspired by Super Mario Galaxy. Some have even said that this is the unofficial Mario Galaxy 3, but I don't think that's a negative thing at all because Mario Galaxy is an absolute banger. But overall, if I were to give a number rating to Astro Bot, I would give it an 8 out of 10, which equates to great on my scale. So overall, this is a very solid game. It's definitely worth playing if you have the opportunity to do so. Go out and support this game, guys, because we need to send a very clear message to Sony that this is the type of PlayStation exclusive that we want to see in the future, not shit like Concord and not shit like God of Snore Ragnarok. So, you know, go out and buy the game if you can. I don't think you're going to regret it. It's a lot of fun and it is definitely worth checking out. But anyway, guys, that is going to do it for this video today. If you did enjoy it, make sure to drop a like on it. I would greatly appreciate it. And let me know in the comment section below. Have you played Astro Bot? Are you enjoying it? Is it your game of the year? Because for me, it's definitely not mine. It's not even in my top 3. That title still belongs to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Coming in second is Space Marine 2, which I should have a review on that out pretty shortly. shortly. Hopefully my voice is better by then, but we shall see. And then number 3 would be Stellar Blade, but Astro Bot is actually 4th in my list of top games of 2024. So overall, I really did enjoy this game a lot and would definitely recommend it. But anyway, guys, this video has gone on for more than long enough. My throat is about to give out on me here, and I am in legitimate pain at the moment. So I think we're going to call it a day and wrap this video up. Make sure to drop a like on it again if you did enjoy the video. And as always, I do want to thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to check out this video and for all the recent support on the channel as well. You guys are the fucking best, and I really do appreciate it. So with that shit said, I will catch you guys next time.